So we are in Marmet, West Virginia, which is about 10 miles outside of Charleston. And this was a key rallying point for the Redneck Army 103 years ago. This is where miners really started to gather and get ready for the March to Mingo, as they called it, where they would ultimately end up culminating and clashing with Don Chafin's army of state police and his militia at the Battle of Blair Mountain.
It's about August 25th, 1921, when the miners first start gathering in Marmet. They're starting to mobilize for the march, and Mother Jones shows up with a telegram that she claims is from President Warren Harding. And she says that if the miners lay down their arms and go home, Harding has promised to mediate the disputes between them and the coal companies. And when she's challenged on this, Frank Kenney asks to see the telegram for himself, and she tells him to go to hell. He eventually does get eyes on it and says it's a forgery. And the miners continue on the march, and Mother Jones goes immediately to Washington, D.C. to try and talk to the Secretary of War and convince him not to send federal troops into West Virginia, because she feels it's going to be a bloodbath if the miners face off against the U.S. Army. To give a little bit more perspective, the meeting in Charleston on August the 7th, you have about 5,000 people gathering to hear the speeches and try to get Governor Ephraim Morgan to intervene and come up with some kind of compromise between the union and the coal operators. So it's even that late in the game that the UMWA is trying to resolve this through negotiation. And Governor Morgan refuses to have any sort of meaningful conversation with them. And it's at that point that they really see the only way that they're going to be able to liberate the miners who are being held under martial law in Mingo. And the only way they're going to get any sort of justice for the miners and for Sid Hatfield and Ed Chambers is with this march. They're marching from here down to Mingo County, and they're unionizing the coal mines as they go along.
So in Marmet, the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum led a community-driven project called Courage in the Hollers, mapping the miners' struggle to form a union that will formally recognize these sites of commemoration from Charleston to Blair Mountain, so folks can get more context about what was happening. For decades after the Battle of Blair Mountain, this history was not one that was taught in school textbooks. And behind us, we're actually seeing miners and their families as they sort of point towards Blair and make their way towards Blair like we're doing right now. And these are actual community members that are in the silhouettes, people who participated in those meetings and shared memories about the mine wars and talk about what this history meant to them. The museum is excited to continue this project, and by May Day 2028, we hope to have built the country's largest labor history trail that will follow this story and really give it its flowers for the first time. So we are in Clothier, which was another stop on the Miners March route. Clothier is located in Logan County. It's about 9 miles from Blair, the town of Blair, and both the mountain itself. Clothier is relevant because this was really a rallying point where the miners' army, gathered. They would probably be, doing drills. They had field hospitals set up here. They were cooking. They were around campfires. One thing that I like to talk about when we think about Clothier is, where were the women in this entire story? So when we talk about the story of the Mine Wars and the lead up to the Battle of Blair Mountain and during, women played a very critical role in a number of ways. So one of which was to prepare meals, both within the home and to grow gardens. They helped break up strikes. they smuggled in weapons under their dresses. But a key thing that they did at this point in time was their role in the field hospital. So right behind Kenney here, we have a silhouette of a nurse, you know, which was relevant for this point in time. Nurses tended to the wounded. These were folks that had been trained in World War I and were with the Red Cross and trained through that sort of methodology. But here we have accounts where women nurses had UMWA stitched across their caps, which I think is important to call out, you know, that this wasn't just coal miners. These were also their families and allies, people they built solidarity with.
Well, a lot of the miners came through here on a train. They commandeered trains at Madison, and they picked up miners along the way on their way to Blair.
Kenney and I, and along with several others, worked on the monument and the markers here back in 2022, and we had several meetings in this local union hall, UMWA 2935. Kenney, what would you say about those meetings and like building the monument here in 2022?
Well, I mean, we had a whole series of meetings, and each time we discussed, you know, exactly what it would look like, and, you know, the most relevant way to commemorate it and all that. And ultimately we decided to, you know, use some of the local citizens here to pose for these. So these represent actual people in the community. And we really, we were planning to put one at Blair, but, you know, because of the land ownership and all that, we weren't able to do that, so we were able to do it here.
One day.
Yeah. It'll happen sooner or later, yeah.
Kenney bringing up the fact that, like, these are, not only are we memorializing, you know, the folks that marched for our labor rights, the rights that we have today. I think Blair Mountain is really an artery into what we enjoy today, weekends, holidays, paid time off, all of these things. And I think the fact that it took 100 years to build monuments to this event says a lot. And the way in which we do this process of building it, we're trying to rebuild community bonds and rebuild a community memory about these events, really. I think West Virginia, especially the state, intentionally forgot this history. This monument
it commemorates the beginnings of the labor fight and all the struggles they had to go through to actually, you know, to get better wages and better working conditions and all that. So that story needs to be told. That's part of our history.
So I Come Creeping is one of several passwords that the miners use to maintain security around the march. It really does speak to how organized the march was. And because somebody got that password wrong on August the 31st, 1921, that's what kicks off the entire fight at Blair Mountain. The other side, Don Chafin's army, has their own passwords and their own identifiers as well. For example, where the miners have the red bandanas, Don Chafin and King Cole's army had white armbands that they wore on their left arm. They had their own passwords as well. So on August the 31st, two patrols meet up on Blair Mountain, and the miners give the challenge question, how do you come? The response is supposed to be I come creeping. And Don Chafin's men respond back, amen. and that's when they know they've made contact with the enemy. So a skirmish breaks out. They start firing at each other, and this is where the first casualties at the Battle of Blair Mountain happen. One of Don Chafin's men, John Gore, who is actually Chafin's right-hand man, is one of the first to be killed. Reverend John Wilburn is ultimately charged with his murder, and according to the story, Wilburn fired at Gore, and the bullet split the stock on Gore's rifle and entered into his chest and killed him. So those passwords and being able to identify who's your enemy is ultimately what leads to the battle starting at Blair Mountain.
One of the most common questions that we get at the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum is, how do we get to Blair Mountain from here? And I always tell people, unfortunately, if you blink, you'll miss it, because this state historic marker is the only thing that exists to let people know you're at the site of the largest armed labor uprising in the history of this country. This is all we got, and it's written by some professional historian sitting in an office somewhere just to get it done, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The end goal, or one, I shouldn't say end goal, one of the goals that we have at the museum is to have a site here at Blair. We want people to be able to come and visit.
Yeah, this makes the most sense.
And
it should be like a park.
Yeah.
A national park or a state park where people can come and reflect, and the mountain will be protected but also enjoyed, an educational space for people to come and learn. And that's what I think we hope will happen.
That's our ultimate goal, huh? Yeah. Okay, we are in the Blair Gap, which is at the southeastern end of the Blair Mountain battlefield. This is one of 3 gaps that the miners were trying to get through. There are 2 more to the northwest, the Crooked Creek Gap and the Mill Creek Gap. But this was heavily fortified by Don Chafin's army. There's a dirt road that goes down the mountain here. They came up that road, they got up here, and they split up and dug in. There's trenches, usually about 4 or 5 trenches about every 100 feet or so that you could find little small groups of trenches. They were determined to keep the miners from coming to Logan through this gap. They had a machine gun set up here on the north crest, which is behind us. And from there, they could see the whole valley, and fire down in the White's Trace branch is where the miners would have tried to come up, which would have been absolute suicide if they did try it, in large numbers. That's why they tried guerrilla warfare. They tried to flank the line, which they came around the point over there and tried to come this way, shoot sideways into the line. But this went on from late August into early September when the army came in to stop the fighting.